So at this point, you can see that the bottoms of these two J's here are slanted at exactly the right angle in order to ultimately create the star logo. The tops, however, are not. Now, we could solve this problem using minus back or minus front, just as we did in the previous movie, but I want to show you a different way to work. I want to show you how you can slant shapes, or if you prefer, skew them, using a tool that's available from the Scale Tool flyout menu known as the Shear tool. Now, my only problem with this tool, I'm going to tell you up front, really great tool. I do have a problem with its name. It's been named the Shear tool since the beginning of Illustrator, even though, and I just have to make this point here, you'll have to forgive me, the word shear under no circumstances means skew. I'm looking at Merriam-Webster, which is absolutely the foremost online dictionary out there. And we're seeing that, of course, it means to clip, as in wool, away from a sheep. It can mean to cut something sharp. It can mean to cleave something, as in the case of shear force. So, for example, you shear the wing off a plane. But even the intransitive definition of this verb has nothing to do with skewing. And while it may seem like I'm just off on a rant or I'm Adobe bashing or whatever, I'm doing this for a reason. Oftentimes, the engineers at Adobe will watch these movies, and I just want to go on record as saying that it's high time the name of this tool was changed to something that makes sense for people, because a lot of folks, in my experience, get confused because this tool just absolutely has the wrong name. You never think to yourself, gosh, I would like to shear something. Anyway, having said that, the Shear tool is a really great tool, and it provides a function that you simply can't accomplish using a dynamic transform effect. And so to demonstrate how it works, I've created this text right here, and I've gone ahead and converted the text to outlines because I imagine you don't have the same fonts. And just to get a sense of what's going on, I'll go ahead and switch back to my black arrow tool, and I'll drag this guy down here so that you can see that there are two different styles associated with this font. There's the solid style that appears light blue, and then there's the inline style, which appears dark blue. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that move. And I want you to know, by the way, that the name of this font is indeed Industria, just in case you're interested. And it's one of those fonts that just doesn't have an italic or oblique style. So let's say I want to create a kind of italic variation. Then I'll just go ahead and marquee the type like so that I'm selecting both objects. And I'll press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac in order to hide the anchor points so I can better see what I'm doing. And then I'll go ahead and select the Shear tool, and I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to bring up the Shear dialog box. Now notice that the axis is set to horizontal by default. Make sure your preview checkbox is turned on, and then just enter an angle. For example, I might enter 15 degrees in order to skew those letters forward, as we're seeing right here. And just in case this is the kind of thing you're really interested in doing at some point, you should know that a standard oblique angle runs anywhere from 5 degrees to pretty much as high as 7. But unless you really want to indicate some sort of movement or something along those lines, you probably don't want to go up as high as 15. All right, so I'm just going to enter 7, let's say. And now let's take a look at how axis works. Right now, we're skewing along a horizontal axis, so the text is actually skewing horizontally. If you'd rather it skew up and down, then you can switch this guy from vertical, and notice the angle value changes as well. If you select horizontal, the angle is 0 degrees. If you select vertical, the angle is 90 degrees, which is pretty darn predictable, I think. It's pretty easy to understand horizontal versus vertical skews. What gets interesting and a little harder, you may never take advantage of this, is when you change the angle of the axis. So let's say I select angle and then I change it to 45 degrees. Well, initially, notice that just kind of pitches the letters forward and down, which makes a certain amount of sense, I think. But it makes even more sense. I'll just show you this trick here. I'll go ahead and set the angle to 0 degrees again, and then I'll click inside the angle value and watch what happens on screen. I'm going to press Shift up arrow in order to increase this value in 10% increments, and you can actually see it shifting on the fly from horizontal ultimately to vertical. And you can go farther than that if you want to. You could change this to 135 degrees or what have you. So feel free to experiment with that. But because I'm working with text and I want to keep the text on a horizontal baseline, I'm going to change the axis to horizontal and click OK. All right, another great use for the shear tool is to pitch text the other direction. So let's say I start with a script font, such as monoline right here, and I want to make the letters a little more upright to achieve a custom effect. But first, notice that I've got a problem here. As soon as I converted the text to outlines and I gave the letters a stroke, you can see a division between each one of the letters. And this gives me an opportunity to go off topic for just a moment and show you another really great use for the Unite Pathfinder function. And so I'm going to press the V key to switch back to my black arrow tool, and I'll click on this type to select it. And it's not looking like it's selected because I hid the anchor points. So I'll press Control H or Command H again in order to bring those guys back. Now, let's say the first thing I want to do is move the strokes behind the fills. Then I would go up to the window menu and choose Appearance. But notice, because the group is active, we're not actually seeing the fill and stroke attributes. To see them, I need to double-click on Contents right there. And that will take me to the contents of the group like so, at which point I can grab this stroke and move it below the fill. So that's not a problem. And of course, it looks a lot better, but we still have these divisions between the letters, which I do not want. And to make that more obvious, I'll press Control H or Command H again to get rid of my anchor points. Notice these lines between each one of the letters. To get rid of them, bring back the Pathfinder panel, and then I'll click on Unite. But I just want to make this point here. The reason I often find Pathfinder operations to be a lot easier to work with than, say, the Shape Builder tool, which definitely has its merits, is that instead of having to drag through each and every one of these letters, all I have to do is select them and then click on the Unite icon, which of course is the first icon in the first row, and everything is taken care of. Now, the only problem is that I'm still looking at a group, as we can see in the Appearance panel. For an effect like this, where we're sharing the same fill and stroke attributes, we're better off working with the compound path. And so I'll just go up to the Object menu, choose Compound Path, and choose Make. Or I've got that keyboard shortcut of Control 8 or Command 8 on a Mac. And now you can see here inside the Appearance panel, we have a compound path and the fill and stroke attributes are conveniently accessible. All right, now let's say I want to pitch these letters backward a little bit. Then I'll go ahead and select the Shear tool. And then I'll once again press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac. That's going to repeat my last cue, as you can see here. And so all I'm going to do is change the +7 degree to -7, like so, in order to create this absolutely custom effect here. And of course, you can click in the value and press the up arrow key in order to increase that shear angle, or you can press the down arrow key in order to reduce the value and thereby pitch the letters backward. And I'm thinking -8 degrees looks great, so I'll just go ahead and click the OK button in order to accept that change. And that, friends, is my introduction to the badly named but extremely useful shear tool here inside Illustrator.